Everyone, Bitcoin dipped as low as something like $78,000 today, and the whole stock market is freaking out. The stock market is way down. Everything's way down. People are freaking out about tariffs. They're freaking out about everything. The whole world economy is freaking out right now, and it's dragging Bitcoin down with it. So I think it's super important that you remember what it feels like right now. And the reason for that is the journey with any high performing asset is going to feel like this multiple times along that journey. And what everybody wants is a very high performing asset that does not have gut wrenching volatility. That asset does not exist. 100% of very high performing assets from time to time have gut wrenching volatility. For example, Amazon in the dot-com bust, even though most of the impacts had nothing to do with Amazon directly, the stock price of Amazon dropped by 94%. If you can imagine a very high conviction person who had a huge percent of their net worth in Amazon, that position dropped by 94%. Now, over time, over a series of years, it recovered and ultimately Amazon became one of the best performing stocks in the world. But that was after a 94% price correction, which is brutal by anyone's estimation. So the price correction for Bitcoin right now is, I don't know, 27%, 29%, maybe it touched 30%, but I think it's still under 30%. Anyway, whatever it is, you've got to understand that that is the journey. The journey with a very high performing asset is it's going to feel this way. And I've noticed something interesting, which is that everybody forgets what this feels like after some time has passed. So it's gut wrenching when it's in it, but after some time has passed, they think, well, that wasn't so bad. It was just, part of the journey. It reminds me, and this is certainly an analogy I have no experience with whatsoever, but people tell me that, having a baby is super painful. And they also tell me that after time passes, that people forget how painful it was. And, then they end up having another baby. And then about the time they're going through it, they're thinking, I remember now how incredibly painful that was, the process of labor and all of that. Again, I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm a guy. I've never been in labor, but enough people have told me that's what their experience is that I figure it seems like a corollary, which is, hey, after some time passes, you don't remember it being as painful as it was. And then, everybody sees your sweet baby and they're like, oh, how sweet. And of course, nobody's thinking of the fact, actually, that was a pretty painful process that it took to bring something new into the world. Well, Bitcoin is still in the process of being birthed as the new monetary system of the world, and the volatility is painful. It is painful when the price drops by 30%. It is painful. I still think we're in the early stages of huge worldwide adoption. Nothing has led me to believe that that is not the case. We had the strategic Bitcoin reserve was signed into law a couple days ago, either yesterday or the day before. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency announced that all banks would be allowed to custody Bitcoin on behalf of their customers. So one day you'll be able to walk into any bank in the world and tell them you want Bitcoin rather than US dollars, and they'll be able to do that for you. Or I should say any bank in the United States. So anyway, so all of the indicators are positive about Bitcoin other than that the macro stock market, the whole stock market, had its worst day since 2022. So the worst day in 2 or 3 years happened today on the stock market. And not surprisingly, Bitcoin got dragged down a bit with it. That's just what happens. People panic. They sell what they can, not what they want to. People act irrationally. As Warren Buffett says, be greedy when everybody's scared and be scared when everybody's greedy. Well, over the last month or two, everybody went from super greedy to super scared, and that drags down all assets with it. So, anyway, so number one observation is everybody forgets how gut wrenching these drawdowns were, and they all just remember the happy thoughts of how they acquired a bunch of Bitcoin for comparatively cheap, or at least held on to the Bitcoin they had through the gut wrenching downturns and emerged on the other side holding a lot more Bitcoin. The other thing that happens is that nobody who didn't go through it seems to have an appreciation for what it was actually like. Just like it's probably impossible for any guy to understand what it's like to give birth to a baby because no guy ever has. It's the same. And well, again, I'm not comparing these two because obviously childbirth is far more painful than a stock market correction. But the correlation of people people, uh, people don't understand who have not been through it is the point I'm making with that connection. And the same will be true in the future. Bitcoin will one day be worth $1 million a coin. People will ask you, "Oh, when did you get into Bitcoin?" And maybe you'll say 2024, maybe 2025, and they're going to say, "Oh, well, what was the price of Bitcoin back then?" And it's like, "Oh, it was around $100,000. I mean, it was over for a little while, but then it was under for a while." And they're going to tell you, I promise you, they're going to tell you, "Wow, you got so lucky. You got so lucky that you were buying Bitcoin around $100,000." Nowhere in their mind will they contemplate the fact that somewhere someone bought Bitcoin for two or $109,000. That's right now worth $78,000. And the gut wrenching experience it is to be down on an investment and to have the courage to hold regardless. Even when you're down, to still have the courage to hold. Nobody understands how gut wrenching that is unless they've been through it. Now, if somebody's been through that with other assets in the stock market, maybe it's Tesla stock, maybe it's Amazon stock, maybe it's Google stock, or anything like that, maybe it's Nvidia stock. If somebody's been through it, they understand it. But if they have not been through it, they don't understand it. And what they ultimately do is they feel like you got lucky. You got lucky because you just bought a bunch of Bitcoin, and then you just sat on your hands, and it was all roses, and everyone was happy, and it wasn't hard. And here you are with Bitcoin you bought around $100,000 when Bitcoin's at $1 million, and you're up 10x on your investment, and 1,000% gain. And people are like, "Oh, well, you got lucky, lucky you." And no, it's not lucky you. You did the work, you did the research, you studied, you made a high conviction bet on Bitcoin, you did it, and then the price went all over the place, which it does in the near term. You went through a gut wrenching 30% price correction, or whatever it is now. Maybe it'll be more, maybe it'll be less, by the end of the day, who knows? You went through the gut wrenching volatility until your investment was solidly up. Once it was solidly up, gut wrenching volatility is not nearly as gut wrenching because at least you're up. Um, but anyway, you went through that, and you have to go through that to get the upside. There is no high upside, low volatility asset. That asset does not exist. If you have an incredibly high value upside asset, it will be volatile for all the reasons I've covered on other videos. It will be volatile. There is no high performing, huge upside asset that does not have gut wrenching near term volatility. They go together. They always go together. In fact, in many ways, you can tell how much upside an asset has by how gut wrenching the near term volatility is, assuming it's an asset that ultimately wins in the end, which I obviously believe Bitcoin will. It's obviously possible to have a high volatility asset that performs poorly in the long term, but high volatility at least tells you that the asset has the ability to be a very high performing long term asset, because there is no such thing as a very high performing, huge upside asset that has low volatility. That's a nice, smooth ride. That asset does not exist. If you want the upside, you got to stomach the volatility. They just go together. So that's where we are in Bitcoin right now. It just is what it is. So principle number one, the volatility is gut wrenching. And secondly, you will forget how gut wrenching it was as soon as it's not, as soon as the price goes back up, you'll forget how you felt right now. It's helpful. And part of the reason I'm recording this video is so I can post it later and say, "Hey, everybody, we just dropped from 150,000 to 120,000. Remember how gut wrenching this felt? Well, remember when we dropped from 109 down to 78? Well, here we are again." So I figure I better record a video so that, I can post it in the future when people are feeling the same way and they've totally forgot that that's just comes with the territory. And the last question you may be wondering is it gut wrenching for someone like me? Yes, not nearly as much as obviously it was in the early days, because once you've been through it a bunch of times, it just doesn't phase you as much. But I know there are people out there that bought at 106,000 or 98,000 or 95,000, and they're feeling that gut wrenching feeling for the first time. My heart goes out to them. It's impossible for me not to feel their pain a little bit, even though I'm obviously not experiencing it directly myself. I still vicariously participate in their suffering when they're going through their first sort of Bitcoin price correction, and they don't know that this is normal. They don't know that the price always bounces back. They don't know that one day it just won't really phase them. And even for me, I mean, I've got for liquid assets, I got 99% of my liquid assets in Bitcoin. But that doesn't mean I don't have needs from time to time. For example, I just had my an addition built on my driveway so that I have room for one extra vehicle since one of my kids is turning 16, and we're going to have one extra vehicle. It's got to have a place to park, and I don't want it parking in the mud on the road. So I had like an extra parking spot built on the side of my driveway. Well, there's a cost associated with that. And as soon as the person who did it, they did a great job. As soon as they call me, I'm going to have to pay them. And I would absolutely rather pay with Bitcoin that is not at $78,000. It is super painful to pay for something like that with $78,000 Bitcoin. I would much prefer to be paying with $95,000 Bitcoin or 190, $109,000 Bitcoin, because it means that concrete work is radically discounted. Also, some of the Bitcoin I bought was above $100,000 per coin. And of course, it's painful to pay for anything with Bitcoin, even though I've acquired, a lot more Bitcoin even since then in the last couple of weeks in the 80,000s. Um, yeah, I think the most recent big purchase I did was, I don't know, 87,000 a coin, something like that, which is when I bumped from like 97% of my liquid net worth in Bitcoin up to 99% of my liquid net worth in Bitcoin. It was somewhere in the mid to high 80,000s. So yeah, it's painful a week or two later to turn around and have to pay for concrete on your driveway in a US dollar priced deal. I mean, obviously the deal was priced in US dollars, so it wasn't priced in fractions of a Bitcoin. It was priced in US dollars, which means if Bitcoin's down, um, I've got to pay with more Bitcoin. So it's painful to part with more Bitcoin, especially when a week or two or three or five back, I would have had to part with way less Bitcoin to pay for the same amount of concrete work. But you know what? You win more than you lose. And in general, I've been way more up than I have down. And so if I've got to pay for some concrete work because the guy calls and says the job's done and, I'm swinging by and picking up a check, well, that money's got to be in my bank account so the check doesn't bounce. So yes, that's painful. And it is possible that I bought some Bitcoin at 87,000 and I'm paying for concrete with $78,000 Bitcoin a week or two later. That is absolutely possible if the person calls today. But you know what? The same is true in the reverse. And far more often, I have bought Bitcoin at 67,000 and paid for something at 87,000. So you're not going to win every time. You're just going to win more than you lose on that sort of thing. And I could dip into the last 1% of my liquid assets that are not in Bitcoin and pay for that concrete work with that. But at 99% of my liquid assets in Bitcoin, that seems irresponsible and it leaves no cushion whatsoever. And my wife, who manages a very small, reserve fund of basically emergency reserves, I don't want to have to dip into that to pay for, her college tuition or her grad school tuition or my daughter's college tuition when she starts in the fall. I want to leave, a tiny amount of US dollars in case Bitcoin is radically down for a day. Like today, I don't have to liquidate Bitcoin on a moment's notice to pay for some major expense. I'd rather at least have the option to use US dollars in that 1% of my own reserve rather than have to dip into Bitcoin on a day like today. Um, but I have thought about it. I have thought, I could go ahead and take my Bitcoin exposure up to 99.5% and pay for that concrete work with, with US dollars instead of Bitcoin. Or I don't know. It's not like half a percent. It's a hypothetical. I don't know what percent it is. It's obviously a small percent, but I don't know what percent. Regardless of what it is, I could take my Bitcoin exposure above 99% by paying for that with US dollars. But again, it feels at least slightly irresponsible when I'm already at 99% Bitcoin as far as my liquid net worth. And I certainly don't want to have to ask my wife to dip into, the emergency reserve she handles for stuff that should be able to be handled by the 1% reserve that I've got that's not Bitcoin. So yeah, it's painful when the price is down because it's no fun paying for stuff with more Bitcoin than you were hoping you had to. But again, total on, I'm up. I went from my cost basis is, let's use a round number, probably 30,000 a coin. Obviously, I've got Bitcoin that I bought as cheap as 6,400. Most of the Bitcoin I bought in between 2017 and 2018 was probably around 9,000 per coin, something like that. But I bought a bunch more Bitcoin in 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. So my average cost basis for all of my Bitcoin is probably 30,000 a coin, something like that. So yeah, it went from, it was up more than 3x to now it's only up, more than 2.5x. So you got to zoom out instead of focusing on the fact that, wait, I'm down compared to where I was. You got to focus on, yeah, but I'm still way up compared to my cost basis. And everybody that's buying Bitcoin anywhere close to $100,000, the same will be true one day. If your cost basis ends up all in, let's call it $100,000, averaging out all the Bitcoin you end up buying, in this sort of rough 2024, 2025 timeframe, if you end up with a cost basis of 100,000 and then it rolls up to 400,000 a coin and it drops to $300,000 a coin, you'll feel exactly like I do, which you'll think, dang it, I'm paying, 25% or 33% more for everything I buy than if I had bought it at 400,000 a coin now that it's only 300,000 a coin. You got to zoom out and say, yeah, but I got to focus on the fact that I bought it at 100,000 a coin. So I got to zoom out and realize that paying for stuff with $300,000 Bitcoin that you bought for $100,000 is great, even if a series of weeks or months previously it was $400,000 a coin and everything was even more discounted. So when in doubt, zoom out. It is a fantastic time to buy Bitcoin right now at $79,200 a coin. It's a fantastic time. And just remember, you will feel this way again. Whatever gut wrenching feelings you are feeling right now, I felt in 2017 and 2018. I felt in 2022 and in 2020. I felt those same feelings in 2020. I felt those feelings in 2022. I felt those feelings every step along the way of Bitcoin's tumultuous journey to becoming the financial system of the world. I felt those feelings. Now, thankfully, the more you feel them, the less you feel them. So with repetition, they start to phase you less. But if you're like me and you've told a lot of people about Bitcoin, that means some of your friends who are new to Bitcoin are going through it for the first time. And it's impossible not to, feel their pain to some degree. So, great job for those sticking with it, which is everybody I know. I'm not aware of anybody that's selling Bitcoin right now. Obviously, someone somewhere in the world is selling Bitcoin. Otherwise, the price wouldn't be down. But I'm not aware of anybody I know that has onboarded to Bitcoin as a result of my efforts. I'm not aware of any of those people that are selling Bitcoin other than obviously needs to support their family and their, lifestyle and, make their life and their family's lives better in whatever way they are doing that. Obviously, that is always the case. But I'm not aware of anybody that is selling Bitcoin just to get US dollars. So good job for you. And just remember, one day in the future, when people says you got lucky because you bought a bunch of Bitcoin around $100,000 or whatever it was, just remember that you did the work, you had the conviction, and you went through the gut wrenching ups and downs, which is the only thing that makes you deserve the upside. If you can't handle the downsides, you don't deserve the upsides. The two always go together. If you don't have that conviction, you're not going to make it. That you got to have that conviction. And nobody gets lucky and buys all their Bitcoin when it's radically on sale right now. It just that never. It just never happens. That doesn't mean people don't add to the amount of Bitcoin they have. But as far as people who buy it for the first time, almost nobody buys Bitcoin for the first time at a time like this because everybody's freaking out. And nobody wants to buy Bitcoin for the first time when everybody's freaking out. So the people who are buying Bitcoin for the first time are almost always buying it when it's not in a dip like right now. Thankfully, over time, their conviction grows and they add to their Bitcoin in a time like this when it's radically on sale. So good for them. A couple people have messaged me and says, hey, I just bought Bitcoin at 78,000. It's gut wrenching, but I just bought it because, now my cost basis is a lot cheaper. So good for you. A bunch of people are doing that. If you've got US dollars that are, that you could possibly spare, it's a fantastic time to buy more Bitcoin. Other than that, just be patient. Be patient, and this too shall pass. So have a great day, everyone. Thanks so much. Keep the faith. Bitcoin always recovers, which is what makes it such an incredible asset. And this is just the growing pains and the birth process of becoming the future monetary system of the world. There's no way around it, but keep the faith. And days like this are gut wrenching. The reward is on the other side. Thanks, everyone.